Welcome to Halftime, a show dedicated to equipping and inspiring people to accomplish what God has prepared them for. I'm Doug Piper, and I'm a Halftime alumni, and these webinars are actually part of my halftime journey. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we have Lloyd Reed, and Lloyd shares with us each month helpful ideas to aid us on our halftime journey. Lloyd is a successful real estate developer who made a midlife transition looking for greater meaning, joy, and impact in his second half. Now, for over 20 years, Lloyd has helped leaders make their second half their very best half. He's the founding partner of Halftime Institute, which is a global team which teaches coaches and connects successful men and women in their pursuit of significance. And he's taken this message around the entire world. Lloyd is also the author of several books, From Success to Significance, When the Pursuit of Success Just Isn't Enough, and with his wife Linda wrote Halftime for Couples. Now, if that sounds like where you are, or maybe you have been, or maybe you'd like to work on creating greater meaning, joy, or impact in your life, or maybe you know someone that's in that season, you can find out more by going to halftime.org. That's halftime.org. And I'll also include all that information again at the end of the program. Now, today on Halftime, Lloyd will chat on a particularly important topic, especially as we consider the impact of quarantine. The topic is finally connected, building deep, rewarding relationships in your second half. Now, Lloyd, you know we all need a tribe around us to finish well. I didn't realize in my own halftime journey just how much I needed these relationships and the difference that they would make until I really experienced it firsthand. Now, like many business leaders, my life was full of work and family and marriage and exercise, really leaving little space for deep friendships and much less intentional peers who would encourage me on my halftime journey. Lloyd, I know you experienced the same thing. Well, for everybody in the audience, in this 30 minutes webinar, Lloyd and I want to explore just why deep relationships are so important in our halftime journey. We'll do a little assessment of our own relationships, set out some simple steps that you could take to get finally connected. And if you stick around for the next 30 minutes following this part, we'll interact with your questions. So, Lloyd, if halftime is about going from making money to making a difference, then why write a halftime book about relationships?
That's a good point, Doug. And of all things, this is an area of particular weakness historically in my life, as you know, since we've become friends, coincidentally. And yet there was a point where I could see that there was really compelling evidence that deeper, more intimate relationships would not only bring joy and meaning and richness to our second half, but would actually be a key part of us finishing well, of actually making our best contribution. I learned that just by observing over the years of my early years of partnering with Bob Buford to build the Halftime Institute, coaching people on this journey. And I could see that intimacy had been squeezed out in most of our lives through busyness, obligations, and responsibilities. And that then very often we felt ill-equipped to pursue intimacy. And frankly, Doug, our friendship is a good example of this in my life. I was reflecting on that leading up to our call today. We got to know each other through being in a halftime group together. And then we got our spouses together. We got to know each other, and we've shared our roadmaps, and we know what our individual goals and growth opportunities are. And I don't know about you, but when you share your plans and roadmap with somebody, it feels a little bit naked. A little bit exposed. And And then, so not only do we have this fun of doing life together as friends, but we're making a complementary impact, right? I couldn't do this without you, and it would be harder for you to do this without me, and we play off each other. And so this is, it's right in front of us, I think, for you and I. And yet for many of us successful leaders that are on our call who are Halftime alumni, they discover that intimacy got squeezed out of our marriages. It got squeezed out of our families. It got squeezed out of our friendships. It got squeezed perhaps out of our relationship with the Lord in our quest for success and the demands that came with the intense careers. And there are three reasons why we have been studying this and working on this for years now, for 5 years now, because it's an important piece to the halftime journey. The first is that when I sit down with somebody in their very first coaching session and ask them, what would you love to get out of the halftime journey? They often say to me, clarity. Clarity about what I should be doing next. What is God's purpose for me next? Should I keep this current career? Should I make some changes? What would be a good platform for me to serve? What is my purpose or mission? But when I talk to them 6 months in and we're on the deep into this journey and they've gained clarity, I ask them, what else is missing in your life? They very often say to me, intimacy. And I ask them, what do you mean by that? And they say deeper relationships. And I say, well, tell me about your friendships. And they say, well, I've got some good friends at the country club, and well, we're not actually, on the same page. We play golf together, but I don't think they really understand where I am or what my I've got some friends, at church, but in my small group, but they're in a different season of life. And pretty soon they will say to me, really, I don't have any close, intimate friends, those 3:00 in the morning friends that know pretty much everything about you. And yet those are very important. And secondly, the second reason is that we're not sure. They are not sure how to build those relationships. We weren't compensated for intimacy in our careers or building our business. We were compensated for results. Now, we might have gotten good at building relationships with clients, but that's a different thing than intimacy. You can spell intimacy as into me see, letting each other into our world so that we can bring what's missing to each other and love each other more sincerely. And then lastly, I have noticed that those who do have these deep, intimate relationships around them are far more likely to finish well. And that's a big factor. We're more interested in how you're doing 30 years from now than 30 months from now. And being finally connected in deep, intimate relationships is an important ingredient to that. It seems that we all need encouragement, insights, perspective, accountability that comes with intimacy. So my journey started when deep into halftime, I realized that I had been focused on accomplishment, busyness, crowded out intimacy, and I was living in the future. I was constantly thinking about what could be, and intimacy happens in the present. And it wasn't until years into this journey and I was watching other people ahead of me with deep relationships, I realized that not only do relationships make life rich, but they're the core ingredient of the Christian journey. I mean, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit have been in deep, intimate community throughout the endless ages of eternity. It's what they're inviting us into, the dance of intimacy. And that's what worship is being invited into the dance of intimacy with the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, where they are admiring each other. We have a privilege of pouring our hearts out back to God. And this is the essence of the Christian life. It's not just a nice add-on. Linda and I had a good marriage. There was no real conflict. We loved each other. We had time together. We enjoyed each other. I was engaged, proactive dad. I limited my work time, so I had time with immediate and extended family. But in the deepest part of my heart, I was beginning to see that life could be deeper and richer, and I had no idea how to get there. So I started reading books. I started watching movies that I normally wouldn't watch. I spent time with Larry Crabb, who's kind of the guru and author about intimacy. And it wasn't very particularly helpful until one of my personal board members and a close friend named Lori suggested that I use my strength of goal setting and focus to make relationships a top goal. That was a big idea. What she was equipping me to do was to pursue something that I knew I needed using the strengths I had, as opposed to trying just nebulously to sort out how could I build deeper, more intimate relationships. That was so helpful. So in 2008, I wrote down a list of 10 people that I wanted to love extravagantly. And so I still carry that list with me today. It's just as unsophisticated as you can imagine. It is handwritten. I wrote their names down today. There are 14 instead of 10, a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law and 2 grandbabies. But I wrote down, what do these people care the most about? And what could I do to be a part of their journey, to be a blessing in their lives? That was the starting place. The first thing that she helped me do was to write down the names. Every person that you want to love extravagantly has a name. And it's so hard to put those down, because when you write a short list of people that you're intentionally going to build intimacy with, it leaves so many people out. And yet you can't build intimacy with thousands or hundreds of people. And then in 2014, I was thinking about what I could do that would be most loving, and what I could give to my brothers and my closest friends. That would be the most wonderful gift to them. And I realized they don't need things. They're fairly well off. And so I decided the biggest gift I could give to them would be to take an interest in their boys, in their sons. And so I made a list of their sons, and lo and behold, there were 10 of them. And so I put a standing appointment on my calendar for 90 minutes. And it's just a regular occurring appointment on my calendar. And it just says, reach out to your friend's 10 sons. And then their names are there, and their emails and phone numbers, so I can text them. And so what happened is, it was just a little bit of intentionality. And I'll tell you today, these years later, 6 years later, my relationship with those boys is so much more intimate. And as a result, my influence in their life, because of my commitment to them, constantly trickle charging their life with compassion and love and resources, encouragement. So this journey for me was so awkward. And I think there was a time when Linda said to me, well, one of the things that happened was in 1997, I set my top goal to learn how to communicate more intimately with Linda. And so what I wrote, I have it here with me, the original thing I did in 1997. It says, build a deeper relationship with Linda by communicating more intimately with her, by understanding why I don't like to communicate deeply, learn the kinds of information Linda wants to know, and how to communicate it. And so here's the sheet. And it took me, I'm so courageous at intimate relationships that, Doug, it took me 90 days to have the courage to share that with her. And when I did, she cried. And a little bit later, she said to me, Lloyd, watching you try to be intimate is like watching a really bad golfer. And I said to her, now you hurt my one feeling, right? So what are you thinking? What's going through your mind? This can be awkward, and yet it's the most wonderful journey, and it's a critical part to our second half joy and impact. I'd love to know your thoughts, and I'd love to maybe if you take us to the poll and see what our friends are saying about this topic.
Yeah, let's go to the poll first, and then if some of our viewers want to add their input and they haven't done it yet, then we'll have a good poll to pull from. So in our poll, here's the question. What do you think is the biggest barrier to deeper, more intimate relationships? The first one is fear. Not knowing how to take relationships deeper. Not having the time to dedicate to it. Finding the right people that I have great chemistry with. And lastly, I have too many relationships, so none of them go deep. The results in our poll so far, Lloyd, it looks like about 60% of our audience is leaning into finding the right people that I have great chemistry with. And second to that right now is not knowing how to take the relationship deeper. So unless that shifts, I think zeroing in on finding the right people that I have great chemistry with is what the majority of our audience would like to see. In my own life, I've been struck. I've had both of my wife's parents have passed, and my dad passed away about 20 years ago. And it's really interesting in the latter days of life. If you haven't built up strong friendships with or strong relationships with people, and at the very end, there's not a lot left other than those relationships that you've built up, and it just really has struck me how important that is in our lives to have a long and fruitful lives. That our business friends are long gone by that stage.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, Doug, you've bumped into some deep friendships in different pathways, right? One being those peers that showed up in your halftime journey, and you may not have ever known them without being on the same journey together. And then also in your expertise as a vintner, or how do you describe?
Yes. My cohort has just been fantastic, and it was quite intimidating at first. Here's a group of business people you've never met before, quite successful, certainly more so than me. But everyone was interested in moving in the same direction, and the like-mindedness is what drew us together. The differences are what make us a great cohort. And so now there's this tremendous relationship that we built between each other, which during COVID has been so powerful. While we've all been quarantined, and I don't know what I would have done without technologies like this, where we can actually have conversations and see people without a mask on, to see people smile and have a conversation. But I couldn't depend on all my business people for that. Our cohort has just been fantastic, and we've gotten together almost every single week, and had long, very powerful conversations that I think have strengthened the group through this difficult time.
Yeah, and what happens, I think, is when we build these cohorts at the Halftime Institute, it's on purpose that we know life change happens with others locally over time. And it gives you a taste of what it would be like, almost like back in college, or if you were in the military or something where you had, or a sports team where you were forced together and you worked on challenges together and you get connected. And what we're hoping to do in doing that is prime the pump so you can see the importance of deep, intimate relationships in this next season, and then you can start looking for them. Now, one way to find these people, based on that question, that was the highest ranking, that finding the right people is one way that we've seen that works is to just start working on the passion that God's put in your heart, whatever your mission statement is, and then look left and right and look for people going the same direction. And then ask your heart, does my heart resonate with these people? And set some time up with them. And just, there's a mysterious piece of chemistry, right? But there's also a piece of character, and there's a piece of alignment around values. And one of my closest friends, I bumped into him in the operating room. Our daughter was having surgery. She was 8 years old. And instead of a nurse coming out with a wheelchair and taking her in the wheelchair into the operating room, lo and behold, the anesthesiologist walked through the door and got down on his knees and looked her in the eye and said, "Carolyn, are you Carolyn? I'm Dr. Williams. I'm going to pick you up and take you in. We're going to take good care of you and going to bring you right back to your mommy." And then he picked up my special little girl and walked her into the operating room. And my heart said, I need to get to know that guy. And 25 years later, he's my best friend. And I bumped into him then in church, and he came into our small group. And when his brother died tragically of an overdose, he and I were working out at the gym, and we cried together. We went and ID'd him in this cheap hotel room where he had died of an overdose. And when my little brother was killed in a car accident last October, 2 Octobers ago, I was in Singapore, and my brother died in a car accident in Portugal. He was 52. It was 2 weeks after he took his company public. He died in a head-on collision where someone was passing going over a hill. And when I arrived back at the airport in Charlotte, instead of taking an Uber home, there was my friend Randy. And he came out of the hospital down to pick me up at the time when my airplane came back in. And he just sat and drove me home. We didn't say hardly a word. He just sat there with me. I might have missed out on that. I might have missed out on having someone who just loves you and cares for you so much that they do life with you, and they're there when you need it, even if it isn't to say some magic word. But the first step was to have my eyes open for looking for some people like that had character and chemistry that we could build the life together with. So, Doug, did I cut you off because we were partway through? You're talking about your journey, and there's also the people that you're building a friendship with around your wine sommelier, and then you also have this great group that you do in the family with the 4th of July events, and I don't know how many tons of fireworks you blow off.
Well, none this year. We broke a 45-year streak of doing it. But Lloyd, the word that strikes me that I've kind of learned through this is there's an intentionality. You wrote down names and you read books. I was fortunate to spend the weekend with a dear friend of mine. We had to make time to do it. I had a crazy week and probably shouldn't have gone, but it was a dear friend, and I said, we need to do this. So there has to be a serious intentionality to it, and that's really the key. Writing it down, putting it on your calendar is so powerful.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So let's spend a minute then, Doug, and map out that pathway, just really at a very high level of, I read books. I read every book. I read Soulmates by Thomas More, and books that I would never have read. I watched movies that were like, chick flicks, and then I watched the movie The Notebook. My mom had Alzheimer's at the time, and in the movie The Notebook, there's this wonderful husband who has a way of teasing back out his wife of many, many years for those glimpses of who she really was and is, coming through the mist of Alzheimer's. And I realized that's living in color, and I've been living in black and white. But how do I get from here to there? There's no apparent pathway. And I had dinner with Larry Crabb, and he was unconsciously competent at intimacy. So here's some things to think about. How do you map out this journey so that for those of us who aren't very good at it naturally, we can make it simpler? First of all, you've got to overcome the fear of intimacy. If you spell intimacy as intimacy, there's a fear that goes with it. And the way to get past the fear is to gain a vision, a captivating vision of what life would be like if you did take that risk. That's what the movie Notebook did for me. And somehow you've got to get that in your heart. Or listen to Tim Keller's sermon on the relationship between David and Jonathan. That will inspire our hearts. And then secondly, break it down into small and doable steps. And that's what Doug and I have been talking about. So, and then do the easiest steps first. And then third, practice the skills of intimacy until it becomes natural. When Linda said to me, watching you try to be intimate is like watching a really bad golfer, she wasn't being mean. She was just helping me understand that, you got to keep swinging. But right now, it's just very rote. It's very mechanical. Well, now these many years later, it's much more natural to me to be intimate with Linda and with my friends and with my family. And then lastly, enjoy the fruit. Celebrate what happens with this journey of intimacy, because it will motivate you to go even deeper. And remember, intimacy is not just with your friends, it's with your spouse, it's with the Lord, it's with your kids, your adult kids, your son-in-law, your daughter-in-law. If you want them to feel that you love them extravagantly, you're going to have an intimate relationship with them. And that takes courage. So, you probably each have been sent the ebook, Finally Connected, where we've tried to boil it down into a 90-minute read. The reason we do ebooks is, first of all, it's viral. You can share it with a friend, so there's no barrier to passing this through the whole Halftime network. And secondly, it's 90 minutes. You can do it. You can fit it into a short period of time. The boil it down into a plan, if that's kind of the pathway, the plan that I see in helping people through this is who, when, what, and how. Who, when, what, and now, and how. And in just these last few minutes, I want to frame that up for you, and then Doug and I will talk back and forth around your questions. The who is every person that you want to have an intimate relationship with has a name. It's hard to have a deep relationship with lots of people. So I encourage you to write down the names of the people that you want to have an intimate relationship with. And just start with a few, your kids, your spouse, if you happen to be married, and a few people. You may not get it right, but you just start. If you don't start with a name, then you won't be able to do the second thing, which is when. Put them on your calendar. Find out what's best for them. So for Linda, every Friday is a Linda Day. I wanted to end up in my life having fallen more in love with Linda when we're 80 than when we're 58. And so 10 years ago, I started blocking off Fridays. It's a Linda Day. And every Friday since then, it's been blocked off. And it's blocked off in perpetuity in my calendar. It's a Linda Day. And, not every Linda Day is a golden day. But I bet you 35 out of 52 weeks a year, they're golden days. And I can live with that. 35 golden days with my soulmate, that's priceless. And then my daughter Carolyn is a missionary with Campus Crusade in France. You know what? We had dates every month when she was lived here. And so we have a standing date every month, and she's there. And she goes to a dinner restaurant because it's late at night, her time. I go to a lunch restaurant. There's 6 hours difference in time zone. And we have lunch or dinner, or however you want to call it, on FaceTime once a month for an hour. And that's continuing to build a relationship. Tomorrow, I'm going to Blowing Rock, North Carolina, with one of my close friends, Joel Hackney, who came through Halftime. And we're building a stone patio in the back of his mountain house together. We've got a bobcat rented and all kinds of fun stuff. It's on purpose. He can afford to have somebody else do it, and it would probably look better when it was done. But this is a chance for us to build intimacy. And then what? This is an important piece. If you spell intimacy as into me see, what are the things that your friends and your spouse and your kids need to know about your inside world? I had no idea what those were. I didn't even have a mental category for them. So one day I asked Linda, what is it you want to know about my inside world that I'm not sharing with you? And if I could, then you would feel like we were more intimately connected. And so I said, could you write down the 10 things? And they're in this book as well, Finally Connected, but I'll just share briefly with you. My biggest dreams, my biggest fears and worries, what I'm disappointed by in life. I told her, honey, that's a waste of time to tell you about my disappointments. It's a mental dragnet. And she said, yeah, well, then you just live your perfect little life, and I'm over here living my little life, and I you don't need me. But if you want me to really be connected, I need to know what you're disappointed by. I thought, wow, that's interesting. What's frustrating you? What do you love about me? Those little things you love about me that maybe you don't mention. Your spiritual life. How is God teaching you or shaping you? What are your aspirations for our kids? I want to know the memories you most cherish. There's 10 things. I carry them in my phone so that when we're together, I can share those things with her. It was so helpful to know what to share. And then the last part is difficult. How? Many of those things, I am going to have a hard time looking her in the eye and talking through. And so guess what? I don't have to get stuck by that. Instead, I can write them out to her in email. I can share them with her in a card. I could even text it to her, leave a voicemail if I don't have the courage to say it, but I can share it in some way. One of the most powerful things of how I communicated what was in my heart was a picture. I had my daughter with me on a 3-day trip to Carmel by the Sea, and we were walking down that beautiful boulevard, and we turned right on Fifth Avenue, and there was a life-size sculpture of an 80-year-old couple sitting on a park bench with their legs intertwined, their hands together, and their faces touching each other, and they were looking off into the distance. And you could see in their eyes that they're doing life well together in their 80s. And I said to Carrie, who was 13 at the time, I just blurted out, "That's what I want." And Carolyn put her hands on her hips and she said to me, "Dad, where are you going to put it?" And she thought I wanted to buy the statue. And I said, "No, that's what I want in my life." And so she took a picture of it, and we came back home, and I made it my screensaver. And she said, "Mom, you know what, Dad?" And she gave Mom that picture. That picture spoke 1,000 words to Linda of what was really in my heart. It might have been the biggest single step towards intimacy with Linda was through a picture of something that communicated what was in my heart. So, action steps. Number 1, read this ebook that we're sending to you. Not because it's great, but because it's a start. Number 2, make a short list of the people you want to love extravagantly. Number 3, set up time with them. Just take it, put it on your calendar, and then share something from your inside world, even if it's just your roadmap. So, Doug, let's go to, let's talk about that a little bit. And if there's some questions, we can spend a little bit of time. Some people might have to leave.
Yes, and we are right at the top of the hour. We promise everybody a 30-minute program, but we also have 30 minutes where we will answer your questions. So is Lloyd, we've covered a lot of points today. Is there any kind of one thing it would boil down to that if somebody's listening to this conversation that they would really want to, make a call to action?
I think, like you said, it's intentionality. To really say that I need a tribe of deep relationships around me to finish well, and it'll bring more joy in my life. Probably will be one of the things that brings the most fulfillment, more than accomplishment. And so I'm going to commit to it. I think that intentionality, it's not so much all the sort of techniques, although those are helpful for people like me and maybe you that don't come naturally to that. Some people probably, Doug, that are listening are going, seriously? These little triers, they need those basic fundamental steps to build deep friendships? Well, yeah, sorry, that's just where we are. But, I've been given an extra dose of strategy and focus, and I can get stuff done. I just didn't know how to do this, but now I can, and that's very helpful.
I know a trick you've taught me is make it a password. So build in intimacy. So every time you're having to put in a password,
Mm-hmm.
in case those are trying, that I don't have that one yet.
That's good.
Well, we're going to move into the Q&A, but for those that need to leave, thank you so much for your time. You can also, if you need to just pop in a question right quick, you don't have to be present to get your question answered, and you'll get an email with a link right where the question is answered. So pop your question in and run if you need to. So Lloyd, looks like we've got 2 questions there. I'll go into the first one. So let's see. All right. So this is not a real deep question, but it is a very practical question. So Salida says, while I will awaken early to attend these, any chance you will offer the West Coast folks a time at a different time? If not, no worries. Put the coffee on. Thanks.
Yeah, this is early for, we're torn between making it later and missing the whole Asian group of alumni, which will watch this at 9:30 at night. And unfortunately, our friends in Europe, of course, are let's see, 9:30. Yeah, they can do this one. They're fine on this one, and so does Asia. So that's why we set it here, because then in the West Coast you can be up at 6:30. If we went to 10:30, it would be too late for people in all of the Pacific time zones in Australia. So that's kind of the best other option is, of course, that these are all recorded and are available for you. And if you happen to miss it, you can go back and watch it again. Just it's not, you can't chime in as much, but you can easily watch them, right, Doug?
Yep, absolutely. And again, you can ask a question and not have to be there. So we appreciate you getting up early, Cecilia. Thank you so much. Our next question is an interesting one from Ken. It's fairly broad, but I bet you've got some ideas. So Ken asks, how do I get finally connected? Which I think is the ebook that he's referring to.
Yeah. So it'll be emailed to you, or if you go to halftime.org and just click on resources, under resources, you'll see books, and there's a picture of it there, and just click and download it for free. So again, it's a 90-minute read, and it's designed, it's a interactive process. It's designed to help you assess your relationships. It's designed to help you figure out a plan, put it into a strategy tool that you can just fill out to build a simple plan for you. So it's a little less unsophisticated than my approach of the 10 deep friendships, or now 14 of them. One of the things that happens is your family, if you have kids at all, your family will grow as those kids get married, and you'll have grandkids coming along. And then those are all relationships that if you and I get better at this with relationships that are outside our family, it helps us build intimacy with people that come and join our family as well.
Yeah, Lloyd, I'm also going to share your email address in there with Jack, and we can send him the link that way.
Yeah, and I'll send Jack. I'll send Jack the picture of the couple in. It's called the Valentine, and I think if you Google on the Valentine Carmel by the sea, you'll see the picture of the couple on the bench. And it's just the kind of thing. Sometimes, if you're visual like me, having a picture of what you want is very helpful.
Yeah, there's also a copy in Georgia of the statue.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Where's that? It's in your backyard?
Well, not quite. But yeah, it's in Georgia. I can't recall offhand, but when we talked about it before, I had found it in Georgia. Cool. All right, we have another question here. And Ken, we'll try and get you that document. So Jeff asks, how awkward were some of your initial friend calls? I'm guessing they didn't jump into getting regularly scheduled times.
No, exactly. The first of these conversations was with my business partner, and I could tell he looked at me like, "What are you doing? What? Is this on a spreadsheet somewhere? How does this relate to our buildings?" and now Andrew's Canadian, so Canadians are more conservative, and anyway, so like they don't hug like we do here in the southern U.S. But so that was awkward, and we just pushed through it, and now we talk about pretty much everything. And then my friend Randy that I told you about, he would call me every week. He was teaching me. He would call me every week, and I would get off the phone with him, and I would say to Linda, Randy called me, and he never got around to. He must have forgotten why he called. And she said to me, "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, he never got around to ask me what he needed." And she said, "Lloyd, he might have called just to talk to you, just to see how you're doing." I'm like, "You can't do that. You can't do that. Doesn't he know everybody's busy? We're busy doing stuff, accomplishing things, making money. You can't just call a guy with no purpose." And she looked at me like, "Gosh, you have got so much learning to do about life." It was hilarious. She and I
group, we set up a regular time. We don't always make it, but there's enough of us there that usually we have one every week. So setting up, putting it on your calendar, that works.
The other thing that helped me with Randy was we decided to work out at the gym together, to do strength training together. And one guy came up to us at the gym. He said, "You guys are like girls." I'm like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, you walk around chit-chatting. Like you're here to work out." Like I said, "No, we're doing two things. We're lifting weights and we're friends. We're talking. That's why we're here. We're getting a 2-for-1." Now that was kind of a, male version of not having to make eye contact with a friend. This is sort of all pathetic, but you know what? It's what you got to do. It's what you got to do. I got a great friendship now. And now I can just have a real conversation. But at the first, lifting weights was a lot easier and having a friendship at the same time.
And intentionality. Great question, Jeff. And Julie has a really good question here. So thank you, Julie, for this one. How do you suggest that I should let my short list of people know that I would like to go deeper in relationship with them? Do I say it up front or just go ahead and start pursuing intimacy without really stating that desire out loud?
Wow, that's good. I don't have any smart answers, I think, Julie, for that. I can tell you that over time, I've told obviously each of the people that I'm committed to them for life, and that anything they need and want that I could do. My answer to them is yes. That I could do, my answer is yes. There may be things they need that I can't do, which I can't do, but if I can. But I told that to them after I had kind of proven my intentionality to them. With my business partner, he and I were on a trip somewhere because he loves travel and he loves ministry. He loves giving. And we were in an airport somewhere, and I dropped my leather thing, and this fell out on the ground, and he picked it up, and so he looked at it and he goes, "Hey, I'm on there," and I was so embarrassed. I'm like, "Yeah, yeah." He's like, "What's this?" And I'm like, "These are 10 people who are going to love him extravagantly." And he was like, "Huh." He looked at it, he goes, "Wow, I'm on there." And that broke the ice, I mean, why was that awkward? What is wrong that is awkward? That should not be awkward that you're going to commit to love somebody. It was awkward, unfortunately. And but that broke the ice. So I don't know, maybe think about each one of the people on your list and say, would this scare them off? Would this be super weird? And if so, just go deeper with them and then make a covenant relationship with them over time. There's a difference between a consumer relationship and a covenant relationship. A consumer relationship is we're going to be close as long as it's good for me and good for you. A covenant relationship is I'm on this journey with you regardless, period. That's it. I'm going to love you. I'm going to be with you. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to do what I can for you. I'm going to prioritize you. And it'd be great if we could do that with hundreds of people, wouldn't it, Doug?
It sure would. But we're getting a little bit of it here because that was such a great question, Julie. That was just fantastic. Well, Lloyd, I think we're at the end of our questions.
Good.
So unless somebody pops one in right quick, I think we will actually end this one in less than an hour.
Good.
And I just want to thank our audience. What a great audience. We've had a lot of good questions. And I think some folks that are interested in going to Carmel and see the statue, but most importantly, to read this ebook and maybe be a little more intentional about our relationships going forward after today.
Thanks, Doug. Such a joy. It's always a joy to do. Thank you for your friendship and a joy to do this together and be able to serve, hundreds of people around the country and around the world and learn from each other, right? This is a peer learning environment of Halftime Alumni.
It really was. And I think Stefan has put it nicely. He said this was so good. So I think it was refreshing. I know it was for me. The webinar was recorded, and you have the link, the very same link you watched it. You can share that with anybody that you think might be interested in watching this. And they can also register if they would like to do that even after the webinar is over. So Lloyd, this was fantastic. It's great after the summer break to see you again. And we'll have more events like this coming up throughout the rest of the year. So bye, Lloyd, and everybody else in the audience. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Doug. See you guys.
Bye bye.